So today's talk is centered around basically to be the medicine. And what does that mean? Be the medicine the world needs right now. So, as we talked about, and you're learning over the course of this weekend, we're in a great state of crisis right now, personally, psychologically, and also planetarily. And in that state of crisis, we also know that we have answers in how to address that crisis. And the answers come in many different forms and fashions. And part of what I believe are twofold of answers that you can go to. Number one is to learn about ancient yoga and classical yogas and all that they offer in the form of medicine to bring balance back to our selves and back to the planet simultaneously. Because if we were to follow the yamas and niyamas and follow the ethics presented in all of the various margas or paths of yoga, we see that it connects us, because yoga does teach us, right, that there is no other, right? There is no other. That means that as we look on this Zoom screen and we see each other, we're actually not separate from each other. We are one collective consciousness. We are one collective species, one collective global citizen, one collective entity of love and peace and joy. And I think that when we look at what yoga teaches us on how to refine our consciousness in order to experience that more in a daily life, that is definitely the number one medicine that we all need. Who's not seeking more love, more peace, more joy, more contentment in our lives, right? Especially after this last year, so many of us are feeling exhausted and overwhelmed and tired from the pandemic. And it is a collective trauma that we all have just recently gone through. And so by all of you showing up for yourselves this weekend and showing up in your daily life, you are showing up for the collective healing that needs to happen. So thank you for doing your part in helping to heal not only yourself, but the whole. And the second part of that kind of being the medicine is to educate yourself on how to be the medicine for the planet. And that is more related to the outer work, which is related to the climate, to create a climate positive lifestyle. And there's 100 actions that you can do in your daily life that has been put together by a collective, a huge team of scientists, of climate scientists, who have gone into how much it would cost or gone into what it are the top 100 things that most impact the climate crisis. And believe it or not, educating women and young girls is at the top of that list. It's in the top 10. And you can find that list at drawdown.org. If you were looking for information on how to do that, drawdown.org gives you that. There's also a book, and this is led by Paul Hawkins, and he does some amazing work there. So when we think about the healing and medicine that needs to happen, we're moving from an energy and a space of fear and a place of tamoguna, in a place of rajaguna, and we're moving into a more sattvic vibration, into a more collective love-based place. And when we go into that space of love and connection and allow our heart space to open and heal our heart spaces so that they are more open, we see that it has a direct impact on so many different levels. And there's been scientific studies that have proven the power of love, right? And the frequency of love. So there was a Japanese scientist, Dr. Emoto, who took jars of water and held the jars of water or put a letter or a word on that jar of water, and would, like love, for example. And then he would take a dropper of that water, put it on a slide, and freeze it, and then take pictures of those frequencies, or what became water crystals. And you can see how beautiful the crystals are, with love, with harmony, with peace. And then also what crystals look like, which actually don't form into crystals at all. They look more like an oil, a drop of oil. But that's like hatred and disgust and separation. And so in this time, when we're seeing a much greater dichotomy in our planetary collective consciousness, it's even more critical that we find and cultivate that heart-centered space of oneness, and remember that everything that we do to help heal ourselves is a part of the collective that helps to heal the imbalance on a global scale. And so there's 5 basic principles, and these are, there's a long list, but these are just 5 that I've felt in all the research I've been doing that is critical for our next steps forward. So there's 5 simple tips that you can do in your daily life that really help to progress us into the place where we have more planetary harmony amongst species, we have more biodiversity, and we rejuvenate and deepen our relationship with nature. So it's not only about reconnecting to nature, it's also about healing the planetary loss that we've had, right? The biodiversity that we've lost, the deforestation and the forests that we have lost. And so number 1 is to become informed. We know in yoga, it's so important to follow satya, truthfulness, and to allow the universal truth to come through. And when we tune to our intuitive self, when we tune to that higher frequency self, we know the truth. We sense the truth even more within our being. And so the more that we can accept information and learn and just process the truth of where we are in the state of the planet, the more profound our effects will be, the more our willpower may be initiated in order to help us do these lifestyle changes that we need to do in order to save the planet. And this is to save the human species, actually. She will last, the planet, our Earth Mother, will last far beyond us. However, our species is at threat right now, and this is due to our own egoic demise. So becoming informed helps us to say, okay, wow, this is really a crisis, and these are some beautiful steps that I can do in my life. So become informed. And that means like doing a carbon footprint calculator, right? Just to give you an idea, one flight from New York City to California is the same as 20% of the emissions of one car's exhaust emissions for a year. So one flight from California to New York, or New York to California, is equal to what is emitted from a car in 1 year. So just learning these kind of things, you might say, okay, could I drive to Chicago? Like I'm in Illinois now, but I was just in New York, right? I live in New York. So I had to ask myself, is it essential for me to fly just because it's faster and more convenient? Or do I drive my hybrid vehicle to Illinois because maybe it's less emissions because it's hybrid? Now, driving your car is not the answer either. More things like biking, walking, joining carpools, taking public transportation, all of this helps to really bring home like what we need to do for emissions, for transportation purposes anyway. And so when we also take public transportation, what we're doing is breaking down the boundaries and the borders between socioeconomic classes. Most often, it is the poorer communities that tend to be forced into or take public transportation. But when we see the diversity taking public transportation, this helps to break down those boundaries and create more of a sense of oneness as well. So there's lots of times that I've seen in studies that says the climate crisis is a social crisis as well. And I think this is one of the components that they're talking about. Number two is do the work. And this is twofold. You have to do the inner work necessary to work on healing the karmas, moving through the karmas, healing the traumas, doing the inner work to help you feel more sovereign, to regain sovereignty in your being. You are a unique and integral part of the whole. You are so critically important to this collective consciousness in this time and space. And it can feel overwhelming in our life to be in this human condition during these very tumultuous times on the planet. But when we do our inner work, we're raising that frequency of the collective. So your inner work not only lifts your own frequency and helps you to feel more joyous, to feel more contented, to feel more at peace, it also gives you insight into your swadharma. What is the purpose of your birth here? It's not for us to be an innocent bystander and just go through the motions of life. We are here for a divine purpose to bring more healing to this planet. So what is your purpose? How can you activate your service? Okay, and service comes in just a second. But doing the inner work is a huge part of the piece of the puzzle. And number two is also to do the outer work. Now, this outer work is creating a climate positive lifestyle. So what does that mean? Well, it means making decisions to reduce your consumption. And it's even beyond conscious consumerism at this point. It's beyond the place where we say, okay, well, let's buy local. Let's reduce our single-use plastic and paper, right? Let's reduce our transportation as much as possible. Let's reduce our flights as much as possible. You know, it's more than just these components. It includes all of this. So one of the most important things that we can do for our outer work, believe it or not, is to reduce the use of refrigeration. So what that means is turning down your refrigerator as the lowest setting as possible and reducing the amount of air conditioning that you use. This is going to have a huge impact on the environment because of what the refrigerant off gases. So reducing your air conditioning, which means you're just tuning more with nature. And I can tell you, as someone who's lived without air conditioning, even in the heat of Texas, you know, you start to see the importance of natural springs and maybe why these cool springs are there, but your body acclimates and you become more resilient because of that. And so you find ways in which to become more in one with your natural environment. And another positive climate action that you can do is to plant a garden or plant trees. Every time you even put a little herb plant like cilantro, for example, in soil, even if it's in a pot, you are helping to pull down carbon out of the atmosphere. Every time you plant a tree or flowers, you're pulling carbon down out of the atmosphere. And so the more that you can plant a garden or plant trees, the more positive impact you're having. And the more trees you plant, the more we're helping to purify our atmosphere. So I talk a lot, I made a meme one time recently that was Prakriti's breath, where the trees inhale, they inhale carbon dioxide, they exhale oxygen. Then we inhale oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. So between the plants and our own bodies, this is our Mother Earth's natural breath. We breathe out, we breathe in what trees and plants breathe out, and trees breathe in what we breathe out. And this cyclical nature to me is just so incredibly inherently beautiful. and just so insightful to the interconnectedness of life. And that's why deforestation is having such a huge impact. So number 2, again, was to do the inner work necessary and the outer work. Then number 3 is to connect with your Earth Mother. So find ways to connect in nature. Find ways in which you can start to have dialogue, conversations with the earth plane and with the Earth Mother and all her species. Just yesterday, my father and I had the privilege to watch a fawn with her mother walking out of the forest, and she was literally born within the last hour because the mother was still like cleaning off the baby fawn. And just to watch how the mother deer, the doe, would protect her and look out for her is no different than I see my sister caring for her children, right? So just to get out in nature and to experience and observe and watch, to connect, and then to see, well, how does nature respond to me being there? What does nature have to say to me as a part of nature? So sometimes just go and find your sit spot, whether that's on your back patio or in your lawn or out in the forest or at the beach and ocean, wherever it is for you, finding that place just to sit and witness how nature responds to you. Because in those moments, you very clearly cannot deny that you are not alone and that everything is connected. When we connect to our Earth Mother, as we learned yesterday's workshop, when we go out into nature, when we go out into our original home, when we return home in our physical environment, we know that there's a reduction in the stress hormones, cortisol and epinephrine. We know that we have a decrease in our depression and anxiety. This is all scientifically proven. We also know that we have an increase in the serotonin levels and in the ways in which we relate to our circadian rhythm. We also know that it reduces our blood pressure to go out in nature. And also it increases our joy and our happiness, and it increases our memory. And so there's so many benefits that we receive as a species when we go back to our original home. And so reconnect to nature. And when you can do that also, if you don't have the opportunity to always go out into the woods or forest or ocean or wherever your natural environment is, you can do this also by cooking a meal for yourself. Cooking a plant-based meal that is focused on where these beautiful offerings come from, these abundant offerings, right? Where does your food come from? And how beautiful it is that through the use of sun and prana, we have this growth of abundance that helps to fuel us and to keep us vibrant and healthy. And the further away we get from those natural components and food sources like natural medicines, perennial food systems that are wild, these all help us to live more vibrant and more healthy. The further away from that and the more processed foods we get, we know that we have an increase of dis-ease and disharmony. So you can connect to nature also in the kitchen. Next is to cultivate, number 4 is to cultivate a daily devotional life. So a heart-centered life. When we begin to bring more love into our life, and this can be done in so many different ways. This afternoon's workshop, we're going to explore a lot of these ways. But like waking up, for example, and before you grab your phone, before you put the feet on the floor, maybe take a moment to just place your hands on your body and just say, I love you. I love you. And I am so grateful for this opportunity, this rare blessed gift to have a human life. You know, like we all know about reincarnation and the beauty and the rare opportunity to be incarnated into this beautiful earth plane, into this physical form, in this time, in this space. We didn't get incarnated as a little ant or a bird or a blade of grass. We got incarnated into a human being, a multidimensional human being, to remind us from the spiritual pure consciousness from which we came. This is our birthright. When we bring more love and devotion into our life, we're raising the collective frequency of the planet. So your work of wanting to bring more love into your life, whether that's through heart-centered meditations, whether it's through processing traumas, doing that inner work like I talked about, having ritual, so just to give you some ideas about this, there was this tree that was falling onto the neighbor's house. And so I told my landlord, this mulberry limb has fallen off. It's almost going to fall onto this, other house. I just wanted to let you know. So he said, okay, no problem. Thank you for letting me know. And this mulberry tree was, I would say, at least 80 years old. And it was a grove of 4 mulberry trees. And if you've ever had mulberry pie, they're these beautiful berries that just fall from the trees, and they come in a huge abundance. So I just put a sheet out in the yard and like shake a limb, and then I have a bowl full of berries, And so he took down every single tree. He cut all 4 of this grove in the backyard, took all these trees. And that was at my voice, my word caused all that death, right? My action to say, watch this limb from falling. And now all these 4 trees lost their lives. And I grieved. Oh, I grieved, because the tree family for me is like my family. And I went out and I did a little puja to them. I poured water on the base of the tree, like a little offering of water. I offered incense. I offered flowers. I offered food for their life. I said, thank you. I placed my hands on the top of the stump and I grieved. And, I think we don't do enough of, if we were to really acknowledge and give awareness to the process of birth, growth, death, decay, because as yoga practitioners, we know that this is just a physical cycle. This is not the truth of what we are going toward, right? What we're trying to evolve and become, which is that state of pure consciousness, right? That place of Brahman, the immortal Atman. So even though we know that there's this eternal pure consciousness, when we honor the cycle of birth, growth, death, decay, and all of its cycles, we can also then give gratitude for that cycle, helping our own transition when the time comes to release the physical Koshik being and enter that state, right? So it's the same as like when you first plant a garden and you have to choose, like, if the seeds are planted too close together, you have to choose which sprout actually dies. It's such a hard decision for me. It's like, why does my hand have to be the one that says, oh, I'm sorry, sprout, you don't look strong enough, you need to go. But in that, I have to acknowledge that there is a consciousness that's governing me also. I am nature. I'm not separate from nature. So if I bring love and awareness to that process, I've noticed personally that it's helped that process for me to feel more empowered and honoring and bringing that devotion and that service attitude to my daily life. And it has broadened just it's helped me feel connected. And as someone who is single and lives alone, and especially in the last year of being in lockdown, and New York is very strict about kind of some of the regulations, I felt very isolated. And I know a lot of people have. I've had many conversations about this. And I feel like what did get me through that time was really feeling that connection with all of nature. So when I couldn't, hug people or see people in yoga classes anymore. You know, I was out in the forest hugging trees, and I realized like, oh, there's a consciousness that honors me back, that there's a hugging that comes back, and there's so much healing that can be done in that way. So try to find ways that you can bring devotion into the most mundane tasks. Like how great it is that we get to turn on a light instantaneously, but also that light has turning on that light has a sacrifice, right? So maybe I can leave some of them off, and that is an act of devotion, is turning off lights also, right? And going to a more circadian rhythm, right? So when the sun goes down, I start turning the lights down. And I've noticed this also has helped to increase my deep sleep. Okay. And there's other things that you can do there as well. And then number 4 is to, oh wait, that was 4. And number 5 is to continue with your yoga practices, whatever that is. And this is a part of the inner work, but it also is a part of building resiliency. So dedicate to a hatha yoga practice. So hatha yoga has been left for this particular time, right? We know the story about Shiva and Parvati and how she was concerned about the humans in the Kali Yuga and what to do. And Shiva was, I'm summarizing, but Shiva was like, I got this, you know, it'll be hatha yoga. And so when we look at hatha yoga and we look at the amount of electropollution that technology is putting off, one way to combat electropollution is pranayama. And I've witnessed it myself. I had a electropollution poisoning event in my last apartment, unfortunately, where I had an extreme amount of radiation that I was living next to a high tension power line that I did not know, an ungrounded wire. And so it created an allergy. So I became allergic to electromagnetic fields. And I still today have dull migraine headaches, dull headaches when I'm around cell towers or a lot of electromagnetic fields. And so as I've been working to heal myself over the past 6 months, I've done a lot of pranayama and noticing right away that the rashes and the things that I was experiencing anytime I was on Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, all of this is going away now. And so I'm seeing this correlation in my own healing path between pranayama and electromagnetic fields, or electrosmog, as it's been termed lately. So pranayama is going to help you to not only become more vital and vibrant, it's also going to help to offset the radiation levels that we're experiencing, especially with 5G towers today. And also hatha yoga, when we look at the amount of dis-ease and disharmony, we know that hatha yoga, asana, meditation, well, concentration practices, pranayama, all do wonders to bring our bodies and our koshic bodies back into balance, our energy bodies back into balance. It raises our frequency. And as we raise our frequency, we're tuning more to that frequency of love. So no different than a radio channel that you're trying to get out of the static. So when we consistently do, even if it's 10 minutes a day, as Swami Sivananda says, it's better to do a little bit every day than to do all of it in one day. So if we did a little bit of our practices every single day, this is the most effective way for you to build resiliency in these turbulent times. And it's going to help you to feel more vital, more empowered, and you're also going to regain your sovereignty and also find, what is my swadharma? How can I become the medicine in the world today? What little steps can I do? And in what level do I want to do that? And this comes to so those are the 5 points, right? So these are kind of like an add-on to the 5 points of yoga, is that we have bhakti practices, become informed, do the inner and outer work, connect with your earth mother, and continue with your hatha yoga practices specifically. Now, One thing that you also may be interested to know is there's different levels in which you can become involved. There's a level of your own individuality where you're like, I want to work on myself. This is what I have time and energy for right now. This is where I feel called. By working on yourself, you're working within the whole. You're helping to affect the whole. And another level is maybe you start talking to friends and family. So that's the next level, is talking to friends and family, sharing some of the insights. And you can do this when they ask questions, but also just by living your life. They'll start to ask you, well, why did you start taking public transportation? And you can explain. So by doing your own changes, making your own changes, people around you begin to notice your lightness. They begin to notice your joy increasing. They begin to notice your healing. And then they start to be curious themselves. So you can work in the family and friends level. The next level is within your community. Now, whether that's at your local yoga studio or whether that's within your job or maybe at a school, your children's school or something like that, it's working in your community. Maybe you yourself are a yoga teacher that wants to offer more eco yoga framed teachings and practices. Well, you can learn how to do that. I'm currently planning courses that help yoga teachers learn how to pave this knowledge forward. So you can look for those courses at ecoyogalife.com. And another thing is then on your state level, your local politics. So your local governance you can do, or even on state legislation. So by getting involved in your town's politics, like for example, I'm involved in several different things within my town, but one thing is that we're protesting for Bluestone Mountain Forest is being threatened, which is a swimming lake for all of us, a natural swimming lake, and it's threatened by a concrete plant that is being put in. And so as I'm learning and stepping into my local level, which feels right for me right now, then I'm learning about how my voice can impact what's happening in my town. And this has been a wonderful way for me to meet new people, to feel in service, to do some karma yoga in a way that not only impacts my own life, but the life of all the species within that forest, right? And then the last level is federal. So if you're someone who's drawn to the federal legislation and you want to talk to congressmen and write letters to senators and congressmen and women, then this is a level that you can do to let your voice be heard. Because what's needed for this time of healing on the planet is for each one of us to realize that we are the medicine. We cannot wait for the legislation. We cannot wait for the laws to be made. We cannot wait for industry to change what they do, because as we're learning and witnessing, they don't consider their impact. And so it's going to come from us. So your role as a global citizen, as you evolve and work on yourself to remember that you're the immortal Atman, to evolve that consciousness to that point of yoga, is a process of empowerment. It's the process of letting your birth have purpose and reason. And so I just want to leave you today with planting a few seeds of how can you be the medicine in your life? How can you not only be the medicine for yourself, but for your family and friends, for your community, and for the world at large? Because you are the medicine already. So as you tune more to yourself, that will become clearer and clearer. And then it will require the courage, the dedication, the willpower, the concentration and focus to answer that call. So I hope you know how important you are to the whole. I hope you know you're not alone, that there is no other, and that you remember the beauty of life and this gift, because our lease agreement with this Koshik experience, we don't know when that termination date is. but we do know that we have every moment to live in love, to live in peace, and we know that every moment is a moment. So I feel inspired to know that who you are is a critical piece of this medicine that we need.